are rolling. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Class 4 of the Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible class at Center for Spiritual Living, Asheville. You're not crazy. We did miss a class last week, but this is still Class 4. It is June 10th, 2019, just so we all know where we are. We always begin in treatment, so take a deep breath and let it out. And then continue to breathe, and as you breathe in this sense of light and love and joy, and breathe out anything that you may have carried in with you that no longer serves you. Leave out the traffic, the stress, the whatever concerns there might be. And breathe in the light and the love and the joy. And as we breathe, we move into that awareness where we know. We know there is one thing going on in the universe. It's one presence, one power, one love, one light, one life. We can call it spirit or God, the divine. We can call it the absolute. Whatever it is all that there is. And since there is only one thing going on, then everything that we see, everything that we touch, is an individualization of that oneness. The energy collapses into form, but is still the energy. The love is still the love, the light is still the light, the joy is still the joy. And we know for each one of us that we are that point of the divine in form as us now. And in that we are connected to all that is and more. We are a part of all that is and more. And I know that we have everything that we need to interpret these Bible stories to where we realize greater truth and greater love and greater joy for ourselves in our lives. And so with great gratitude and thanksgiving for the eternal truths in this book, I simply release this treatment into the mind of God, the body of God, and the heart of God, knowing that it is all God, as together we say, and so it is. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Who showed up last week?
I was here.
Linda and Pegatha, are your names on the sign-in sheet?
Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't show up. I got a call that said it was canceled. Yes, I'm sorry.
She knew about me. We texted back and forth.
Right. I just wanted to know if anybody else showed up last week. The way that we have to communicate with you is the sign-in sheet. So if you put your name in the sign-in sheet, and if we have your phone number, if you've ever filled out one of those yellow or blue cards, then we can contact you. However, I do not perceive that we will be canceling another class. I don't think we've canceled a class for years. But I don't like the idea of people coming here and being locked out. That's just bad vibes. So we don't want to ever have that happen. You could come in and open the place up and have your own class and be okay with it if you wanted to do that. So how many people were not here for class 3? Couple. Those of you that were here for class 3, do you remember what we talked about?
David and Goliath.
David and Goliath. So I want to do just a little bit of a review. We've got David, and we have Goliath. And what did we learn about David and Goliath? David was not the underdog.
Because he had truth on his side.
D-O-G. He was not the underdog. He was the winner all along, and that goes completely against what most people get from that story. David had the 5 stones of truth. He was skilled in using that truth. Remember, he had fought the bear away from the sheep. He had fought the lion away from the sheep. And he had no qualms at all about taking on Goliath. Goliath, on the other hand, what did we learn about Goliath?
Arrogant.
Did not always speak the truth, and he was conspicuous.
Let's go with arrogant.
How about this? Size doesn't matter.
Size doesn't matter.
Speak for yourself.
this is an effect, not a cause. So the 5 stones of truth with David made him much grander than any amount of physical size could do for Goliath. So when we talked about this, what I thought was most important was that David was never the underdog. David and Goliath is not a story about a little boy that slays a giant with a slingshot. It's a story about faith and truth and knowing who you are, and when you know who you are and know how to use your spiritual tools, there is no obstacle that you cannot overcome. And overcome that giant to the end where David jumped up on him and pulled the giant's sword out and cut the giant's head off. This was not a halfway job. This was a complete job of getting rid of whatever seeming obstacle, seeming threat seems to be in our life, simply by going to the stream, which is what?
Moving consciousness of mind.
Moving consciousness, you got your notes. Moving consciousness of mind. It's going to spirit and picking out the 5 perfect truths and then casting them with all of the confidence of all of the trust and the faith and the demonstrations that you've had in your life, and knowing that setting spiritual law in motion will result in a change of condition, no matter how big that condition seems to be. And so, of course, David was always going to win out, and Goliath was always going to die, because when you bring problems into the light of truth, they change. Linda?
I really thought it was significant that he didn't think he needed any armor. He knew he didn't need any armor.
Right, because armor was only going to weight him down. It was only going to protect him from a perceived threat that he didn't see. He said, "You're nothing to me. I'm going to kill you." And he did. Really? I just think it's so great to be able to see things differently than the way most people see it. Most people see it that, well, you know, if you're lucky, then you'll be like David and slay the giant. But there was never any doubt how it was going to work out. And don't we need that when we see a perceived giant in our life? We need to know that simply knowing truth and setting spiritual law in motion is going to take that sucker down, and we're going to change all of our circumstances. We're going to free all of the people, all of the thought forms inside of us, and the things that were trying to attack us are then going to be the slaves of our current state of consciousness. So they're not a threat, they're going to elevate us by becoming our servants. Pete?
I just thought of something. If he cut off his head,
Mm-hmm.
assuming we can say the head is the mind,
Mhm.
thoughts, it's actually cutting off those thoughts that are not good, that thoughts that are
Well, he
bringing you down.
He was trying to kill all of David's people. So they were threatening thoughts.
Right, so that's what threatening. He's taking down threatening thoughts.
And then he got to harvest all of the other thoughts, which were the rest of the people, and have them become useful to his people.
But that then is individual to me. As I change my thoughts, or as I see and then deal with a thought that is not really what I want to be, where I want to be, I could be a David. with
Right.
my own thinking.
Right. And I notice sometimes when people look back at their lives and say, this was a terrible thing that happened to me. This was my Goliath. I was raped, I was abused, I was taken advantage of, I was conned out of my money, whatever it was, this was a terrible thing that happened to me. And when you can raise your consciousness, then you can get to the point where you say, there was a gift in this. I learned so much from this. I've grown so much from that. And so you're really kind of taking those old ideas and turning them into your servants that will then serve your rise in consciousness.
That's what I was trying to say.
Come on in, Marla and Bill.
Right there.
So do you have anything else you want to say about David and Goliath?
The other thing we covered was Moses.
Right. Anybody want to say anything about Moses? You got the 40 years, 40 is a period of completion. Yeah, indeterminate but complete period of time. B.
My favorite from Moses, and I don't know when I read it, supposedly he hears from the bush, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. And the interpretation of shoes being take off your old beliefs. And I've always loved that.
Right, take off your old beliefs.
So whenever I'm thinking of my feet or shoes, it's, okay, am I looking at this from my old way of being, or am I taking it off and opening my mind to the new?
Wonderful.
I love that.
I do have a quick question in regards to, when we got to the manna part, I never heard what manna meant.
What is that? This is, you're the interpreter.
Well, in the Bible part, it says it's food, but I don't remember what the, I remember I heard it in one of the Dan Brown books,
What
had
is
great
your
definition.
interpretation? So let's say you're standing out in the middle of the wilderness, you've been out there for decades, and every day, the exact perfect amount of food that you need shows up. I don't know if it showed up on the ground or if it fell down from the sky, I don't know where it came from, but it was there. What does that mean to you?
Well, that would be sustenance.
Yeah, what kind of sustenance?
That can be open to a lot of,
Oh,
anything.
any kind of sustenance, to have that trust that whatever you need is going to show up, that it's always here. And that you don't have to hoard it because the stuff doesn't keep, and you live in the faith that every day you always have whatever it is that you need to do whatever it is that you need to do.
Okay.
Even when circumstances look like you're lost in the wilderness and you're just gonna die out there, you know that every time you need something, it's there.
Yeah.
Not so much that it's being given to you, but that it's already there, it always shows up, because it's an outpicturing of consciousness. Bill, welcome back.
Thank you. I was just going to say that the statue that I have at home, is a copy of Michelangelo. The Moses has horns on his head, because they mistranslated in the Bible when they did it from the Greek to the I guess it would have been Italian or Latin at the time. They translated as hornet instead of halo.
Oh, and
so
Michelangelo
he did
painted it?
statues of David and of Moses with horns.
I have not seen that.
Which leads to some people to believing that Jews have horns.
The Bible was translated over 360 times to get to the King James Version. So do you think that maybe some of the story changed?
I'd like to point out that the Hebrew 5 books are copied with an intense consideration to not making error. But it's from Hebrew into Hebrew. But the Hebrew they spoke then, is biblical Hebrew, doesn't have any diacritical marks, and it's not really the modern Hebrew. It's kind of like the way ancient English is to us.
And the culture of the Hebrews was to use allegorical stories to make a point. Not necessarily historical accuracy, but there's a point to be made by the story. So when we get caught up in whether or not this is historically correct, we might lose the greater experience of learning through the actual story.
They do make an effort to, the scribes, make an effort not to have a plot.
I know, because, there's the story about the Catholic priest that's going from a really old translation of the Bible, and he says, celebrate! There's an R in there. It was celebrate. Instead of celibate. One little letter, boy, can change a lot of things.
I
tell them to change the practice though.
I'm not getting into it.
So I have a request. Remember last week I said we're finishing up with the Old Testament, and I had a request to look at some of these ideas in Leviticus. Leviticus has all the rules. Leviticus makes the Ten Commandments look easy. And the big quote from Leviticus that is thrown around a lot is the quote about homosexuality. And it is Leviticus 18:22, and it says in there that it is an abomination. And that has been used for so many people to say you're not lovable, you're not okay, there's something wrong with you. I still have no idea what Jesus was doing with 12 guys out in the desert all that time. No, I just think that maybe we take things too literally. And we don't know how they were translated. We don't know what bias the translator had that it went into those translations. But I want to give us a little comic relief with this whole Leviticus thing. This is not metaphysical interpretation of the Bible. This is just, really? Do we need to take the Bible this literally?
Well, I don't understand why that's the only rule in Leviticus they actually want you to follow. They don't follow any of the others.
So this is from a letter in her radio talk show.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Laura Schlesinger said that as an observant Orthodox Jew, homosexuality is an abomination according to Leviticus 18:22 and cannot be condoned under any circumstance. The following response is an open letter to Dr. Laura penned by a U.S. resident, which was posted on the internet. Dear Dr. Laura, thank you for doing so much to educate people regarding God's law. I have learned a great deal from your show and tried to share that knowledge with as many people as I can. When someone tries to defend the homosexual lifestyle, for example, I simply remind them that Leviticus 18:22 clearly states it to be an abomination. End of debate. I do need some advice from you, however, regarding some other elements of God's laws and how to follow them. In Leviticus 25:44, or Leviticus 25:44 states that I may possess slaves, both male and female, provided they are purchased from neighboring nations. A friend of mine claims that this applies to Mexicans, but not Canadians. Can you clarify? Why can't I own Canadians? I would like to sell my daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. In this day and age, what do you think would be a fair price for her? I know that I am allowed no contact with a woman while she is on her period of menstrual uncleanliness, Leviticus 15:19-24. The problem is, how do I tell? I've tried asking, and most women take offense. When I burn a bull on the altar as sacrifice, I know it creates a pleasing odor for the Lord, Leviticus 1:9. The problem is my neighbors. They claim the odor is not pleasing to them. Should I smite them? I have a neighbor who insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly states he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or should I ask the police to do it? A friend of mine feels that even though eating shellfish is an abomination, Leviticus 11:10, it is a lesser abomination than homosexuality. I don't agree. Can you settle this? Are there degrees of abomination? Leviticus 21:20 states that I may not approach the altar of God if I have a defect in my sight. I have to admit that I wear reading glasses. Does my vision have to be 20/20, or is there some wiggle room here? Most of my male friends get their hair trimmed, including the hair around their temples, even though it is expressly forbidden by Leviticus 19:27. How should they die? I know from Leviticus 11:6-8 that touching the skin of a dead pig makes me unclean, but may I still play football if I wear gloves? by planting 2 different crops in the same field, as does his wife by wearing garments made of 2 different kinds of thread, cotton polyester blend. He also tends to curse and blaspheme a lot. Is it really necessary that we go to all the trouble of getting the whole town together to stone them? Leviticus 24:10 through 16. Couldn't we just burn them to death at a private family affair, like we do with people who sleep with their in-laws? I know you have studied these things extensively and thus enjoy considerable expertise in such matters, so I'm confident you can help. Thank you again for reminding us that God's word is eternal and unchanging. Your adoring fan. So let's talk about that.
She's never answered.
There's no answer to that. That's crazy. So here we have some of the real hard and fast rules of the Old Testament that probably were being used in some way to organize society. The rules on kosher cooking were created because they didn't have a lot of water to wash with, and if they used the same knives and utensils in their meat and then put them into their raw dairy, they would get really sick. So they made it a law. I understand that the idea an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was actually reeling in the revenge, saying you couldn't kill someone because they knocked your tooth out. You know, it had to be equal, and you could only do to someone else or demand restitution from someone else that was equal to what you had lost. You couldn't go overboard on it. So I understand that there might have been some kind of a greater mindset about having a society that works. Maybe there was some reason that you didn't want to mix threads or plant 2 different plants in the same field. You know, it goes against total current day farming techniques and manufacturing, and we think it's silly. So there might have been some value to it in the past, but for us to take those old values and incorporate them in our modern day experience, to most of the results in that, if you did any of those, was that you would get killed. And to use them to make people wrong or hurt people seems unnecessary, ridiculous, crazy, but probably those words are too strong. It seems like maybe they've lost their value as time has gone by. And I know that there are plenty of people that have had the New Testament thrown at them, the Old Testament thrown at them, whether it was for gender identity, whether it was for women in the workplace, or I don't know what else, other kinds of things that has been done in a very hurtful way. And I want to be part of something that is outgrowing that we can look at some of these stories in the Bible and not use them against each other, but that we can use them to grow and expand our own awareness of what's going on. And I just wanted to open up the doorway to see if anybody had any comments on that, especially you, RJ, since you brought it up.
Well, like you say, it's been used against so many people for so long. It's understanding what were these rules about, and that's understanding about cleanliness, and it makes sense. I know there's one thing concerning not sleeping with someone of the same sex. It's something to do with the temple prostitutes, something like that, which is part of some of the religious groups. I don't know if you have any background on that.
I have no background on temple prostitutes. It's a fascinating idea.
It wasn't related specifically to everybody potentially sleeping with someone of the same sex. It has something to do with, there's a lot of, part of their
Fertility goddesses.
was sleeping with, you know, these various male temple prostitutes, something like that I've heard. Anyway, there are a lot of really great books out there on what does the Bible really say about homosexuality and things like that. So I spent a lot of time researching those.
Good for you. I know we have people in our center who in this day and age in Western North Carolina were very publicly thrown out of their Baptist church and came very scarred and very wounded because of that. I know we have little boys that are told not to cry and little girls that are told not to be tough, and that's just a recent cultural shift. Bill?
Historically, a lot of these things made sense. If you looked at the cultures, the things about homosexuality, restrictions and so forth, were a way of separating themselves from the Hellenic culture, which was very powerful. Greece was very powerful at the time, and a lot of people adopted Hellenic culture, and
Which had a lot of homosexuality
which
in
had
it,
a lot of
yeah.
homosexuality in it. And the things like you were saying with the temple prostitutes, if you wanted to worship, well, if you wanted to go to the temple, you had to eat or partake of the meal with Baal's, the servants of Baal gave, which was a kid, and I mean a goat, seethed in its mother's milk. And if you couldn't mix milk and meat, then you couldn't go to the temple, but it also meant you couldn't have the prostitutes. So they had to put in a strong way of stopping the men from going to the temples of Baal and using the temple prostitutes. And that's actually where that comes from. And a lot of the other things, like not eating pork, was simply you couldn't raise an animal, a pork animal, without trichinosis at the time. It was a very bad idea to eat pork, or to eat any of the bottom eaters, filter feeders, and so
Right,
forth.
shellfish.
For the simple reason that you couldn't raise clean animals like that at the time. So it was really, a lot of it has to do with washing hands. Also, they wash hands before sex, before eating, before praying also.
Right, and in a place where water was not abundant, washing hands was
Extreme.
very important and often ritualized, because you didn't just get up in the morning and wash your hands.
So also, Jesus wore a little shovel on his belt to bury the feces. This was a very big
Little
thing.
camping shovel.
Public defecation was a big thing that the sect which Jesus belonged to outlawed. They had to bury their feces. A lot of this developed into the Greek culture of Leviticus, which was like a physician, but he was also very interested in public health and in where you built your latrines and how you used the stream and where you drew water from.
Right,
And all this was an attempt to control disease, actually, at the time.
right. So it wasn't a statement about someone's basic value. It wasn't a statement about that person. It was a cultural experience to try to keep people safer.
Also,
And we don't know really what those translations are anyway.
well, also they needed population. They took a very dim view of men not raising, not breeding, not having children.
Unless they were priests.
I'm sorry?
Unless they were priests.
Well, actually, the priests of the temple were only up until about 70 AD, and they were the Cohens. They could marry. They could and did. Now there haven't been any priests in the temple since 70 AD, so that's not even an issue. That Jesus went off to the desert to meditate and was celibate at the time was probably a fact, that when they went to meditate, they would be celibate. But if they meant not for life,
Right.
they meant 40 days or whatever, whatever you're doing.
Jane?
Well, I wonder about the epidemic of priests molesting young boys, and it was so, it was so popular these days to have happen, it's just a huge.
Anytime you make someone wrong, you wound them. And when people are wounded, they act out. So, the basic beginning of all of that is not to make people wrong. And then they don't have these deep wounds of hiding who they are, trying to pretend they're someone that they're not, but, that which we suppress is gonna come out. And then people are acting out in ways that that is not their first choice, but it comes from that original woundology. So let's stop making people wrong.
And so therefore, there was some sort of a law that priests weren't supposed to do that.
Right, how did that work? Yeah, it didn't work because it made people wrong for natural urges. There's nothing wrong with sex.
Yeah, exactly right.
And when we say, oh, eating is wrong, breathing is wrong, sex is wrong, laughter is wrong, we set ourselves against ourselves and everybody's gonna lose. B.
I'd just like to add that it's not only religions, it's any time there is a group, like right now, one of the biggest things coming out is the Boy Scouts. There's been just as much sexual abuse among Boy Scouts as probably in their church in terms of population, world population. So it must have something to do with
I think it has to do with being wounded, by saying that something's wrong with you. In indigenous cultures, in days gone by, people who were gay, people who were transgendered, they were seen as the mystics.
Right.
No, they weren't even just fine. They were seen as the mystics. They were seen as the spiritual person. They were sacred. They were held up in high regard. And so instead of being told there's something wrong with you, you have to hide it, they're held up and said, oh, you are closer to the balancing of the energies of the universe and lifted up. Yeah. I know we could learn something from that.
Well, I know in Native American, a lot of Native American culture, not gonna say all, but a lot of them have 5 sexes, they don't have just 2.
Right. We're so limited. Okay. Anything else on Leviticus, on Moses, or on David and Goliath?
I have a question. When
Yes.
you're dealing with someone that is very religious in some aspects of it, how do you deal with them saying things that, they're taking it like this gal taking one phrase out of the Bible and
I don't deal with them. They don't come anywhere near me. Because they're not gonna make me mad, and they're not gonna make me believe them.
and you're not gonna make them change their beliefs either.
Right. I tried making people change for decades. I still try making people change. And it doesn't work. The only time people change is when they wanna change. You love me, but you're not gonna change for me. The only person you will change for is you. So I don't waste my breath. And I think that I have an energy around me that those kinds of people are not attracted to. We used to have that. When we were out in Fairview, people would call us and tell us we were the work of the devil, and I was concerned because the Klan was, I don't know, alive and well out there, and I was concerned that we would come home and the center would be burned down and there'd be a cross in the yard. For that matter, I think John's first cousin was a member of that club. He threatened the very first day we opened in Fairview to stand out in the driveway with a shotgun.
Nice.
Yeah, that's sarcastic. So I don't have that energy of people coming toward me. And we have very much less phone calls left on our answering machine about how John and I are leading you all into hell and eternal suffering and hellfire and all of that. And it doesn't, we're not a vibrational match for that anymore. So they go and they bother some other new thought. Okay, we ready to move on?
Yes.
Tonight, we're gonna talk about one of my favorite stories. We are going to talk about Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a great story, and I've got 8 pages of Bible quotes, and I think I'm just going to tell you the story and then refer to the actual quote if I need to. So Nehemiah was a Jew, and he was living in Babylon. The Babylonians had taken over Jerusalem, and anyone who is out of their country, once they've been taken over, they are automatically a slave. Not necessarily building the pyramids with a whip, but you do not have free will. You cannot be captain of your own ship. You know, you are confined by many rules in this other country. So Nehemiah is a 20-year-old Jew living in Babylon, and he lives in the palace. He is actually the cupbearer for the king. And that means that before anything in the cup meets the king's lip, he takes a sip of it, so that if somebody's going to die, it's going to be Nehemiah, which also puts him in close proximity to the king. And actually, if anyone was going to poison the king, the one to do it would be Nehemiah. So there's proximity, there's a certain amount of trust, because the king is trusting Nehemiah to taste the wine or whatever before it goes to the king, and not slip something in, you know, on the way to the king. So here we have some ideas. I'll bring this over here. Nehemiah is Jewish, and he is living in Babylon, in the palace, cupbearer, that's the name, with the king, as a slave. So let's start picking this apart with your metaphysical interpretation awareness that you've learned up until now. What have we got? What is, Babylon is misspelled. B-A-B-A. B-A-B-Y-L-O-N. What is Babylon? We just had that.
Oh, yes, we did.
Breezy's taking notes for the whole class. Who was in Babylon? What happened in Babylon?
They built the tower and.
Yeah, the Tower of Babylon.
They couldn't understand each other.
They couldn't understand each other. What happened to Lot's wife?
Turned into salt.
Turned into a pillar of salt. What kind of a community was Babylon?
Immoral?
What? It was messed up. Messed up. So if we're going to have, remember, places are what?
Places are thought? No.
States of consciousness. People are thoughts.
Yeah.
Places are states of consciousness. So what kind of a state of consciousness is Babylon? It's a messed up state of consciousness. And here is Nehemiah, who comes from Jerusalem. What is Jerusalem? What kind of state of consciousness is Jerusalem? High state of consciousness. Jerusalem actually means city of peace. So here we've got, we'll do Jerusalem. J what? E-R-U-S. Jersey. That's a hard one. Jerusalem, which is peace. City of peace. So we have Nehemiah, whose state of consciousness originally was at peace, but then he got moved into Babylon, into a messed up state of consciousness. Have you ever done that?
Oh, yes.
You got it all going on, you're all at peace, everything is good, and the next time you look around, you're living in Babylon as a slave. Because when we are in the messed up state of consciousness, we are a slave to it. We're in our reactive brain. We're not making wise choices. We're not transcending all of the experiences. We're caught up in it. We're being jerked around. We're on the effect end instead of the cause.
Does Jewish have a definition like that?
No, that's why I changed it to
okay.
Jerusalem. So the thing is that even in a messed up place, he's still living in the palace. He's still hanging out with the king, even though he's a slave. He's up the upper echelons, the upper
Upper class.
yeah. So what does that tell you about him? Even when he's messed up,
He's still a little bit of a higher consciousness.
he's got a higher consciousness than the other slaves in Babylon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he has inherently within him a higher state of consciousness because he's not out, you know, building the pyramids or making bricks with straw. He's the cup bearer. Cup taster. The cup bearer. So what would you say about that? You just said it.
About him being the cupbearer?
No, about him being in the palace with the king.
Oh, he has a higher consciousness than
What, Marla?
Higher state of consciousness.
Higher state of consciousness.
He's eating good in the neighborhood.
But he's a slave because he's living in the messed up country of Babylon. So this is going to be important because the story of Nehemiah is, like all stories in the Bible are, transformation of consciousness, spiritual growth, evolving into a higher state, and he has work to do. So Nehemiah is hanging out in the palace, and a friend of his, or a family member, or an acquaintance, or somebody comes in from Jerusalem. And Nehemiah says, hey, tell me, how are the people in Jerusalem doing? How are because they're slaves in Jerusalem still, how are they being treated? How is life there? How is the city? And the people come and say, oh, it's terrible. The people are suffering terribly. They don't have their lands anymore. Everything has been taken away from them. Their children have been taken away from them. They're starving. And the wall around the city was burned down when it was attacked. So, what do you think a wall, you got Jerusalem, Jerusalem, and then you have a wall around it. And if you've ever been to Jerusalem, there really is a wall around it. So what do you think the wall around the city of peace would represent? Protection.
Setting it apart.
Setting it apart.
Sense to
Yeah,
make it,
keeping,
non-violent, won't be violated by the other passing tribes.
Safety, yeah. Protection, safety, you
yeah,
have to
keeping in what's there and keeping out what's not
Keeping
there.
the peace.
right, so much of it is protection. And there was no wall. And Jerusalem was not being protected. There was a wall, but it was rubble, and it was easily gone in and out of. I think there are 7 gates around Jerusalem, which would be the number of what?
Shoppers.
Person. 7 is the number of completion. It had just the right number of walls or of gates around it. But by now, the city had been overrun, it had been taken over. There were people who had been moved to Babylon to work as slaves for the Babylonians, and there were gangs running the city. There were a lot of other people, other than the original tenants of Jerusalem, had moved in and moved into people's houses, taken their land, just run them over, and the original people who lost, this is what happens when you lose in battle, they had lost everything, and they were having a lot of difficulty just surviving, much less thriving. So, Nehemiah starts to cry. And he said, this is where my fathers are buried. This is where my family's graves are. This is my city. These are my people. I'm so sad to hear of all of the trouble that has fallen on them. And he goes around moping. Cough drop. Now Nehemiah up until then has been a pretty happy guy, 20 years old, cupbearer for the king. You know, he's doing okay. And the king looks at him and says, "Why are you so sad? I can see you're not sick, so it must be troubles of the heart." And Nehemiah says, "It's true. I just found out that the city of Jerusalem has been ransacked and raided, and the people have been thrown out of their houses, and the wall around it has been destroyed, and it makes me very sad." So the king said, "What do you want? What do you want?" Now this consciousness that came from peace has been tarrying in messed up land, but has been hanging out in the palace with the king, had the self-worth to say what he wanted. He said, "Well, what I'd really like is to go back to Jerusalem, and I would like to help my people there." And strangely enough, the king said, "Okay." But the king made some deals. "I want you to come back when you're done. I'm not just releasing you from slavery forever." And Nehemiah said, "Well, what I'd really like is I'd like to be able to go into the king's forest and to take plenty of lumber into Jerusalem so that we can rebuild the walls and the gates. And I'd like to have some help because I can't do it all by myself." And so the king agreed to this. Now, what makes you think that, why do you think the king would have agreed to give a thought, which is Nehemiah, the ability to shift consciousness when the king was in charge of the lower consciousness?
Because it would raise his consciousness.
Yeah, raise up the consciousness.
You've got to get
What's
some
that
out of it.
says? Yeah.
Do you think that there are times when you want to grow, and even the parts of you that are holding on to the old beliefs, the old patterns, are willing to help you, even if that means that you may grow beyond those old beliefs? Isn't there a part of you that is in charge of the sabotage, the self-destructive tendencies, the lack of discipline, whatever it is that is keeping you from growing into whoever you want to be, and it says, "Okay, I'm going to get behind you," instead of fighting tooth and nail every step of the way? Haven't you had that? That's what I think this is. That this is that ruling consciousness in the state of messed upness saying, "I love you so much that I'm going to help you, even if that means that you may leave me. But I want to make a deal that you don't leave me, you're going to come back." And I think that's the bouncing back and forth from peace to messed up to peace to messed up. So Nehemiah hits the road. He hits the road with a letter that says he is now the governor of Jerusalem. He hits the road with letters to gain him safe passage through the land, the consciousness between Babylon and Jerusalem, because you know when you go through land, you're going to go up, you're going to go down, you're going to have water, you're going to have desert, you're going to have open road, you're going to have jungle to go through. You know, you're going through your personal growth process. So you're going to have to go through states of consciousness, but he's got this letter from the ruler of the consciousness that he's leaving that says, "I'm going to support you and guarantee your safety during this time." So he is moving forward, going to Jerusalem. When he gets to Jerusalem, he's aghast. This is his home, and it's been,
Decimated.
yeah, I was going to say it probably looked like it had been bombed, but it had been decimated, it had been burned, and the people had really had their their feet cut out from under them. They'd lost everything, their home, their money, their status, their families, their children. They'd lost it all, and they had barely been surviving, many of them starving in this process. So, Nehemiah gets to the city of peace and sees all of these thoughts. What are thoughts? What are people? Thoughts? I gave you that one. People are thoughts, and these are thoughts of
Yeah.
depression, lack, fear.
Illness. Fear.
Let's go with powerless.
Grief.
That's enough. So here is Nehemiah moving into this new state of consciousness, and instead of being welcomed with open arms, cheerleading, rah, 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 Nehemiah, you are the captain of your ship, you decide your fate, you can do this, you got this. Instead of having those kinds of thoughts, he has thoughts that say what?
Defeat.
What the heck am I doing?
What the heck am I doing here? I'm defeated before I even start. This is too big for me. This is impossible, right? So here you are, going from, I do not want to live in messed up land anymore. I am going to do whatever it takes for me to get out of here. I'm going to have my back. I'm going to carry through. I'm going to do this. And then you get there and the first glimpse is, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? There's no way I can handle this. There's no way I can do this. This isn't happening. This is impossible. Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many of you moved here from somewhere else? Did you have that experience in the move? I'm going to move to Asheville. This is going to be great. I am not going to live in this whatever place anymore. I'm going to move to Asheville. I'm going to gather up my stuff. I'm going to sell my stuff. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start finding places to live in Asheville. I'm going to get it all together. And then you come and you land in Asheville and you go, oh my God, what have I done? I've had people come into this center and they say, I thought this was the right thing, but you know, there's no place to live, there's no people here, there's no jobs here, and I just have to go. And then I have other people come here and go, this is the best thing that I've ever done. This is the best place to live. I've already got a place to live. I've got wonderful friends. I've got 3 job offers. This is wonderful. So when we get to our Jerusalem, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look the way it's looking, because we brought our consciousness with us. Nehemiah's consciousness was Babylon. Messed up, crazy, lack of communication, chaotic. And he brought that with him. And so this is his journey now, is transforming his consciousness. Once he made the journey, because the destination is not always the end of it, once he made the journey, it was up to him to do the growing and to be able to pull off what he wanted. What did he want?
Peace.
Peace. Yeah, he wants to restore.
He wanted to restore the wall around Jerusalem. He wanted to protect the city of peace. He wanted to get rid of the gangs, to get rid of the warlords, to allow the inhabitants, the thoughts of the city of peace, to be able to flourish and grow, and for him to protect that. Now this was a pretty tall order for one guy. What?
20 years old.
Yeah, 20-year-old. This was a pretty tall order for one guy, and he had all of these thoughts, these ideas, meet him and say, you can't do this. So the story of Nehemiah is really what happens after he gets to Jerusalem. He's there for 3 days. Does anybody remember what 3 is? Wholeness. So he's there for 3 days, which is a period of time that is whole. And he goes on a midnight hike around the wall. He's gonna scope it out. Why do you think in the story it's a midnight hike?
He would be as visible in the night as he would be in the daytime.
Right, he wouldn't be as visible, so again, he's looking for safety. Because there are these people who are probably not gonna willingly leave Jerusalem and let the inhabitants have their land and their property and their life back. There probably is going to be some resistance to Nehemiah coming in. So he's going to keep a low profile and go around and check out the scope of his work. Some people would call that therapy. You know, go inside and see, well, how much work do I really need to do here, and see what I'm in for if I'm gonna take on this job, although he was always up for taking it on, even if other people were telling him, no, it's just awful here. So he goes around, and there's metaphysical meanings of all of the gates that I didn't get into, but the gates mean certain things around the city. And when he's done and he sees what he's in for, and he feels that he can do this, he contacts the other Jewish people in Jerusalem and has a meeting. So people are what? Thoughts. And what is he doing in contacting those thoughts?
He's checking out his thoughts.
Checking out his thoughts, gathering them. As he's saying, I've come from Babylon, I've brought wood from the king's forest, I have workers here to help us do this. I want you to come together with me, and we can rebuild the walls around the city of Jerusalem. What is he doing to his thoughts? Raising his consciousness. Haven't you ever had a project, and I don't think I can do this, and then you go, well, how could it be possible? I mean, aliens could come down from the sky, and you could do that. You could win the lottery, and you could do that. Somebody could show up and help you, and you could do that. You start working with yourself to bring yourself the possibility that this could happen. You actually start asking inside of yourself for support in carrying out this project. Jane?
Well, when I was a little kid, and in my family, I was the only one who thought that love was the thing to do, and I felt so good about it. And I thought it would be so easy to fix. You know, my father, who was crazy, and I set out to be the savior of my whole family. Well, I got smashed because they were it was a spiritual thing though, but
You have risen. Huh? You may have been smashed down then, but you have risen now.
yeah, I have to rise again. But it's not that I just was looking at the parallel, which will oftentimes, if you look and you see a real messed up thing, you think, oh, it would be so easy to fix. And then you step into it.
And that's the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And that's what all of these Bible stories are about, the spiritual journey. You're always going from one state of consciousness to another state, and that's the spiritual journey. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and pick it back up again at 8:15. Thank you, everybody who brought food. Thank you, Stephen. So, a little bit of my, we're back, Bill. A little of my metaphysical research. Nehemiah represents one who has been carried away from spiritual peace, Jerusalem, into the confusion sense of Babylon. Later, as he shifts in consciousness, he turns into Nehemiah the prophet. And as that consciousness of the prophet, he is the faithful, persistent one within us that believes in the divine possibility for man. So he's the one who's inspiring the people of Jerusalem to have a better life, to be able to open up to this idea that there's more. But as you know, when we aspire to something better, or when we release something that no longer works, it's not always smooth sailing. So in this story of Nehemiah, when he gets to Jerusalem, before he does the little hike around the walls, he is met by a couple of leaders. One is called Sanballat the Horonite. And that is, the Horonite is a thought belonging to the Horonym state of consciousness and the opposing, fighting, resistant attitude that it takes while being dealt with in the overcoming of error. So, here is resistance. Here is someone from a tribe that is saying, oh, no, you don't. You're not coming in here and rescuing the thought forms of Jerusalem. You're not restoring this consciousness of peace. We're going to resist you. And then there was another person, Tobiah the Ammonite. And the Ammonites are a wild, uncultivated state of consciousness. So they were wild, they were resistance, they're untamed. You know, when you go into your thoughts and you start trying to discipline your thoughts to think the way you want to think, to live the life that you want to live, and sometimes out of the blue comes all this craziness. These people are representing that resistance, that wild, untamed, undisciplined ideas and thoughts that we meet as we're moving into a higher state of consciousness. And obviously the story is going to be what happens between Nehemiah, the residents of Jerusalem, and these opposing thoughts. I don't want to just read you Bible. It's boring. So he has a meeting with the residents of Jerusalem, the thoughts of Jerusalem, and he gets agreement that it's possible that we can do this. Look, I brought all this wood from the king's forest, because wood, I've been to Jerusalem. There's not a lot of wood there. The wood that's there is pretty scrawny. So building wood, lumber, that's got great value. And because it was the king's forest, remember the land is a state of what? Consciousness of the king. So he brought some of that higher consciousness with him, and he's gathering up these downtrodden, depressed, in the lack, fear, powerless ideas and wanting to lift them up. He's saying, I believe that we've got a chance here if we come together, if we come into alignment with this new idea, that we can restore the city of peace and all of the thoughts that go along with them. So he starts getting some agreement. Doesn't get agreement from everybody, but he gets some agreement, and he starts the building process. There are chapters in the Bible, in Nehemiah, of just names and names. This person of this family, this person, son of that, this person, this group, this tribe. They did this, and they did that, and they did that. And that shows how the consciousness comes together to solidify the different aspects of the wall surrounding Jerusalem. So in the beginning, he's got some helpers, and he is getting to work. He's not someone who's sitting back and directing. He's climbing up on the ladder, and he's putting rocks back in place, and he's building doorways that the gates then will be, and doors and locks. They always had a lock to be built in the gate so that they could close off the city from any outside. People would be thoughts, negative thoughts, any thoughts set out to harm them, that they could close that down. And again, Bill, it's metaphysical, it's not historical, because Bill was saying sooner or later they're going to get overrun. That's what happens anytime you put up a wall. But this is all about, I can stop thinking the negative thoughts I have the structure within myself to refocus on the peaceful thoughts that are represented in this, and I have the wherewithal to stop letting the negative thoughts invade me and take me over. And that is some pretty good spiritual discipline. That's why you come to a center like this, so you can learn how to think what you want to think instead of just being run over all the time. So he gets some of the groups together, and one interesting thing was that when the outer tribes of people living outside of the city heard about what was going on, they came to help. The Levites came to help. They're all listed there. They came to help, and they started working side by side with the people from Jerusalem. What do you think that meant?
A merging of thoughts.
Stand in consciousness.
Oneness.
Coming into alignment.
Yes. And even ideas from far away can come to help you. You know, you're not just self-contained in what you're doing.
Thinking outside of the box, so to speak.
It's outside of the box. Even though you don't have buy-in from all of your thoughts, you still have some craziness and some resistance and some negativity and limitation and fear and it's going to be impossible and all of that stuff. There can be other thoughts that come in. Maybe you hear about something that inspires you, or you get an idea from something, or something somehow helps you. Other ideas that are not even being benefited by the wall that you're building around Jerusalem, they can come in and help you. So it was very important that these other tribes started coming in to help, because this was big work. This was sifting through rubble and finding the rocks that would still work and carrying them up and piling them up on the wall and mortaring them in and putting lumber in there and building a real live wall out of the rubble. So you've got the local people are helping, the people from far away are hearing about it and coming together to support this, and then you've got more and more local people doing what? Joining. Because, you know, once you start getting rolling on something, then your subconscious goes, okay, I give up, we'll do this. Once everything starts to look like it can really work, you've got the parts of you that'll step out on faith and go, I know it looks impossible, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And then you've got the other parts of you that want some guarantees and want to see that there's support and progress being made, and then they will jump in. Those thoughts and beliefs will jump in and say, okay, I guess we're going to do this, I might as well get on to it. Now the thing is about in the story, the gangs, the warlords, the people that had taken all over the property, they were not happy. You can imagine. They were not happy that the other ideas were getting all of the energy and the focus, and that change was happening. Have you ever resisted change? The only thing that's constant is change. So change is happening, consciousness is shifting, and those resistant ideas are getting madder and madder and digging in more and more. So this is where the threats start coming in. First, it's threats. It is, you can't do this. You don't have any authority to do this. Yes, I do. The king made me governor of Jerusalem. We don't believe that. You are defying the king's orders. The next level of threats were, we're going to come out in the middle of the night and tear down the wall building that you did during the day. Sabotage. Anybody ever have some sabotage going on in their lives? We're going to undo what you have worked so hard to do. It's like going on a diet and you just start to lose weight, and then all of a sudden you go crazy and start eating all this stuff that just undoes the whole chemical process that you had going where you were burning fat and your metabolism had speeded up, and it took you 2 weeks to get there and it took 2 hours to mess it up. Those are the thoughts. And then the last thought was, if you won't stop, we will kill you. We will come out and we will kill you. We will slay you.
Oh, wow.
So what do you think the thoughts of peace did?
Stayed awake all night and guarded it.
They did. They stayed. Do you know this story?
Maybe.
They stayed awake all night and guarded. They didn't say, okay, we're thoughts of peace, we're just going to give in. No, they're not going to give in their consciousness of peace to something that is attacking them, but they're also not going to go charging off to war. They're going to guard themselves. And so in some sections they had one person would work and the other person would be there standing, literally standing next to them to guard them from the onslaught that had been threatened. Other sections, the thought that was working carried their own sword and spear and shield, sword and shield, so that it could protect itself. And then there were systems where if a group was seen coming to attack, there would be a trumpet blown, and everyone had a rendezvous spot to come to. And why would you come to a rendezvous spot?
Because you're stronger together.
You're stronger together.
Safety in numbers.
Safety in numbers.
Yeah.
And what do you do when you're together?
Support each other.
You support each other.
Yeah.
That we can have the support of all of us when we feel like we're under attack. Not just scatter ourselves to the wind, but let's come together, let's regroup, let's remind ourselves that we're safe, and let's go back out and build the wall. So when those techniques didn't work, the thoughts of resistance and wildness and negativity decided to try another tact. They decided to work a deal. So they would send a delegation out. Nehemiah's up on this ladder carrying rocks and stuff like that. And they're saying, Nehemiah, come down. We want to talk to you. We have a way that we can work this out for the highest and best of all concerned. We want to have a meeting. We want to talk to you. And the phrase that Nehemiah is remembered for, he would look down off the ladder and say, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down.
Oh.
Now, if you look in consciousness, where is he?
Elevated.
He's up on a ladder. He's in a high state of consciousness. He's moving what? Stones. And what did David do with 5 little rocks? What is he doing with boulders? He's moving truth. He's putting the truth out there. He's lifting truth up. And they would come down and say, no, really, we want you to come down and talk. We've got a whole new offer for you. We think you're going to be really happy. It's going to be really great. Come down. And all he would say is, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. And then they threatened him and said, if you don't come down, we'll kill you. And he said, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. And that's the stance that consciousness must take as we are shifting the energy and creating what we want in life. We're going to have stuff come at us. We're going to have stuff try to lie to us, try to work a deal with us, just flat out scare the bejesus out of us. They're going to threaten us, and all of these are our own thoughts that will rise up as sabotage, as self-destruction, as, well, I did this thing, I've done a little bit of it, so isn't that enough? Can't I work a deal and let that much be okay? I know that I said I was going to do 100 days of happiness, but I've done 10 days of happiness. Isn't that enough? That's the inside of our psyche, and it's being dramatized, by the Bible story. And this is just the beginning of the book of Nehemiah, but I think it's the most important part. And he doesn't come down other than to rest, and they didn't bathe, they didn't take their clothes off, they worked, they protected, they ate, and they slept. And Nehemiah fed 150 people at his table every night, the people that were helping build the wall. What is it when Nehemiah feeds people?
Good for us.
Sustenance.
Sustenance for the thoughts. He's supporting them. He's making sure they're okay, taking care of them, and inspiring him and lifting them up to be the people that he knows they can be, to be the thoughts, the consciousness that he knows they can be. So eventually, the wall around Jerusalem is rebuilt. It's rebuilt with all of its gates. It's rebuilt the way that it was before. It's in balance. It's in harmony. It has everything that it needs. And it took two months, according to the historical Bible story. It took 2 months to do that. That's not long. I mean, in a Bible story, yeah, in a Bible story, it could have taken years and years and years of people working with their hands, being inspired, and being uplifted. And that's why they say Nehemiah went from just this person who came from the city of peace but was lost in Babylon and messed up land, into the prophet, where he went back to the state of consciousness where he belonged, and then he lifted all of the thoughts up to where they could reestablish the consciousness that he wanted, to where the children of Israel could live in Jerusalem and live in that state of peace and prosper and thrive and have their lands back and their families back and their homes back. Remember, homes are what? Consciousness. Lands are what? Consciousness. It's all consciousness. They were restored to their rightful consciousness because he was doing a great work and he would not come down. Now I gotta tell you, we have people who are in the middle of a breakthrough and they break down and run. They break down and run. I got a letter from somebody over the weekend saying, I just am not up for this, and I'm not going to be there anymore, and please take me off your legacy wall, and please drop my membership, and all of this stuff, because I just can't do this. And I called and said, you don't have to do anything, you can just be here and be loved and supported, and no, I don't want that. So what that says is, I'm about to have a breakthrough, but I'm choosing a breakdown, and I'm choosing to run away, because I don't believe that I have the wherewithal, or I don't have the I'm not coming down. Evidently, I'm not doing a great work, and I came down right away, instead of I'm doing a great work and I'm not coming down. It was easier for me just to go back to Babylon and to live in the chaos and the hecticness than it is to find that inspiration and discipline to create the shift in consciousness, which is really the consciousness that Nehemiah came from and belonged in. It's not like he's forging new territory, he's going back to who he is. Troy.
I was just wondering, we're studying the history of the Jewish people. Back in those days, it was well known that these stories were allegories. That's how things were passed on. And so throughout time, have the Jewish people continued to see these stories as allegories?
Oh, I don't think so.
Or somewhere along the line, has it shifted from its initial intent of being allegories and being tales of consciousness to tales of history?
Yeah.
It's
It's like Jesus, which we're going to move into the New Testament starting next week. You have the historical Jesus, you have the religious Jesus, and you have the mystical Jesus. Most people are looking at the historical Jesus or the religious Jesus. but it's the mystical Jesus that has all the good stuff. So have people forgotten that these were stories told around a campfire to teach?
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether the printing press was a good idea or not. The Bible was the first book.
It just strikes me though, if anybody would hold tight to tradition, I grew up with many Jewish friends, and I understand the culture to a point, and I just can't see them letting go of their original understanding for anything.
It's how people are taught.
Yeah.
It's the same in Ireland. I mean, it's a mindset, it's a state of consciousness that will remain until it changes. And there's a group of people in Ireland, in Israel, probably in the Far East, in every culture, I think, that don't want to, not that they don't want to, that there's an inability to move ahead.
And I think that's why we're so special. You know, because we are willing to look outside of the box. We are willing to look at a greater truth.
There won't be any change if we don't do that.
Right. I agree. Bill?
I just want to say that Judaism lacks a central figure that, like, as in Catholicism, the Pope decides what is Catholic thought and what is not. But there's no such figure or such group or anything in Judaism. But,
We need a grand rabbi.
well, there are different groups, there's a grand rabbi for that group, and they all fight with each other, which is one of the things that bothered me. I mean, when I was living in New York, I actually heard about groups of people physically fighting with each other over points of religion in Brooklyn. Various different Hasidic rabbis. By the way, Hasidim are not the Orthodox. They are people who dress and act like people did in Poland about the 1800s. And they're more charismatic than anything else. But the Orthodox too, I mean, they finally now have a group that's supposedly uniting them, but there's many different ideas about what is correct Jewish thought. And in Israel, they have even ideas that would eliminate some people from this country or from foreign countries from saying that you're a Jew simply because you haven't done the ceremonies the way they would do them in Jerusalem. The way they would do
I didn't know that. My experience, because I grew up in Miami, my experience with Jewish people was that they were very family oriented, they were really pretty kind.
Yeah, well, the average person is, but the truth of the matter is, if you get two Jews together in a room, you get at least 3 opinions.
Thank you, Bill.
Maybe more.
Any other comments on Nehemiah? What'd you learn?
I have a
Betty?
question. I mean, I love the story and the allegories, but my question is, in the story, did he go back to Babylon?
Yes. Yes, because he kept his word.
Okay, I just was wondering because it's like, well, she didn't finish the story.
So did Babylon change after he went back?
I don't know. Babylon is no more.
So did he finish putting the wall up?
He finished putting the wall up. And what struck me is that in the Bible story, it only took him 2 months. And I've seen construction sites.
Years.
And this was in
More or
the
less.
old days when they didn't have a lot of machinery.
They also work 24/7.
I just feel like I need to just interject this thought that I feel so often people are willing to give their power away to a quote authority who generally twists things around and interprets it for their own political purposes.
Exactly.
So, we need to start thinking for themselves.
Exactly. And don't be surprised if some of thinking for ourselves brings up resistance. one of the draws of giving our power away to an outside authority is that we don't have to deal with our own resistance. We just do what they say. My second husband's grown son, who was raised in science of mind, turned into a Assembly of God devotee. And I remember my second husband saying, "How can you do that? They tell you what to think." And he said, "I know, they tell me what to think."
Wow.
And that's a draw for some people. I don't wanna have to go through the dark night of the soul. I don't wanna have to go through my own moral, fearless inventory. I don't wanna have to look at myself. I wanna just be told what to do and move on. But you're right, we have to learn how to think. B.
I've started reading Ernest Holmes' papers, and exactly Nehemiah's story and what you've all said is exactly what he's been talking about. What I've just read, chapters 4 and 6, is mind-boggling. It's just, I know
It's the
I've read the
hero's
book
journey.
before, but it didn't penetrate.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden I'm saying, oh my gosh, look at this.
It's the classic
It's just amazing,
Joseph
those
Campbell's
papers.
hero's journey.
Yeah, and he did it.
Yeah.
And he did it by synthesizing the best of the best, going back 3,000 years. It's
We
just
love our
mind-boggling.
Ernest.
Just mind-boggling. I'm overwhelmed with his gift.
So what did you learn from Nehemiah?
It's just more important to just keep on with your dream rather than forget it.
There you go. It's more important to keep on with your dream than just forget it, because if you forget it, you're just gonna go back into depression, lack, fear, powerlessness, and you're gonna live in a messed up consciousness.
Work hard, higher consciousness.
Yeah. Nobody said that this is just gonna be handed to you. But the benefits are huge.
Sometimes being responsible for ourselves is more than some people can take.
I know. I can't say that. John went to, where is it? He didn't go to Mentone, Alabama, he went to the place across the border in Tennessee, wherever it was, and interviewed Edwin Gaines, because she is, being honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from Unity, and she's being promoted in Science of Mind magazine, and John's writing the article. And that's as much as I can say until the article comes out.
Surprised you said that.
But this thing about not everybody's up for it, yeah, you know, I've been doing this 35 years in ministry, and some of the most difficult moments is to watch someone bail when I can see so clearly that they're just about to make it. And to me, that's cowardness. It takes a lot of guts to say, if I'm gonna die here, I'll die doing what I believe is right, because I don't wanna live if I have to be poor and sick and miserable. I am not gonna do that. I am gonna risk it all, and I am gonna go for it. And that energy changes consciousness. But to say, oh, I just don't think I'm up for it, you know, I haven't had a nap, and I'm just a little too tired, and I need some self-care here, and people aren't nice to me, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's like, snap out of it! But people do that, and you can't make somebody grow or change. They've gotta do it because they want to, because it's so hard that the only thing, at times, not all the time, but at times, it's so hard that the only thing that's gonna carry you through is your own drive. Yeah, and haven't you ever been in a relationship when somebody tried to change for you, or you tried to change for them? How did that work? The only one you're gonna change for is you. Even if you have to stay awake 24/7 with your sword and your shield and lug rocks up a wooden ladder, and that's your life, you'll do it for you. And then you get to live in the city of peace. Yeah. Anything else? I have really enjoyed playing in the Old Testament with you. I think we've got 2 more weeks and we'll do Sermon on the Mount and the parables. If there's anything else that you really want addressed in the New Testament, let me know. My response may be, which I said to Ophia and then she didn't come, research your story, come prepared to present it, and then we will put on our metaphysical interpretation hats and look at all of the meanings of that. Okay, take out what you're gonna give. Thank you for the very generous way in which you support the center. We're doing well. Yes, I'm very grateful. And what I know is that this infinite presence and power of light and love is abundance and prosperity in its very nature and essence. And I know that everything that is created out of it or as it has inherent with it the prosperity, the abundance, and the blessing of its nature. So I know that each one of us is a being of prosperity, a being of abundance, a being of light, and a being of love. And I know that we give this gift tonight from that state, and it carries with it prosperity and abundance and light and love. I know that that energy pours forth from each one of us, fills up this room from the floor to the ceiling and all between the walls. This air is rich and blessed with God as us. And as Spirit moves in our lives, it touches us. It blesses us and it heals us. It reminds us of the blessed, prosperous, and abundant life that we live right here and right now. I know that each one of us comes together this night to make this Center for Spiritual Living Asheville all that it was ever meant to be. A place of peace, a beacon of light, a tower of strength, and a fountain of wisdom that touches the lives of all who call it home. And so it is. In this baskets are blessed because it came from us. Yeah. And I know that we gathered together to make this Center for Spiritual Living Asheville all that it was ever meant to be. It is a place of peace. It is a beacon of light. It is a tower of strength. And it is a fountain of wisdom that touches all of our lives and all of the lives of everyone who calls it home. And so it is. I love you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.